This video is how to host a quadball practice. Maybe you're thinking of starting your own team or you're taking over a team and you're looking for an example of how a practice can be run. This goes through a sample format. There's obviously lots of different examples and ways that you can host sports practices online. Here's an example that you can use, and then you can build off of that to find what you like. So the first thing is you've probably marketed your practice either with flyers or in-person events at community things. Something I really want to emphasize is that when you're telling people where to meet you, it's really, really helpful to have a map and actually draw, like put an X or put an arrow to where people can meet you. So this is an example of a park, Sunnybrook Park. This is a really big park. There's a lot of ways to enter. There's multiple parking lots. And if you just say, we're at the sports fields at Sunnybrook Park, there's a chance that someone could get lost and frustrated and not find you and leave before the practice even happens. So in this example, I would say, we're going to meet next to the north lot at Sunnybrook Park, or I would draw a circle and include this on my online event page to avoid the chance that someone can't find me and gets frustrated or anxious and leaves and doesn't actually attend the practice. This is another example of a park. This one is much smaller, much less likely that they're going to get lost and not find me. But even with this, I would still say I'll meet next to the parking lot, or I would draw an arrow showing where for people to meet me, just to avoid that kind of mix-up, especially if there's another sports group there, or there's multiple people at the park and they don't know which person is the quadball person. They might be intimidated and not able to find you, and it can still cause some unnecessary anxiety. So unfortunately, even if you've been able to market your quadball practice and you've gotten someone excited and they want to come, the day of, they might still be looking for a reason to go home before the practice has even started. So it might look like it's going to rain, or it might be too hot. They might feel lost, not seeing where the practice is. They might be feeling shy. So maybe your language isn't their primary language. Maybe they're not used to talking to people of their gender, or they're out of their comfort zone. They're not used to coming to team sports. Whatever doubt or anxiety is going on in their head, if they show up and they can't find you, that's where all this can start taking hold, and they might decide to just go home. It's not worth it. Another thing, I think this was more of an issue before we went with the name Quadball, but they might still not really understand what the sport is and think that it's a prank or someone's playing a joke on them. So if they show up and they don't see the practice and they start doubting themselves, thinking, what was I thinking? How could you play a sport on brooms? I'm going home. This is so embarrassing. They might not actually be patient enough to wait and actually join the practice. So try and remove those barriers, remove those opportunities for doubt. Help them approach you. So if you are running the practice, you should be early. You definitely should not be late to your own practice. If you have hoops, set them up right away, because those are a beacon. People will come out to the hoops. They might recognize them, or they might just come out due to curiosity. You've likely put up posters or event pages, that arrow on the map that I just talked about, so people can find you. But even so, if you are at the field and you see people wandering around looking a little lost or looking a little shy, do this beckoning, this hand gesture, come on over, make eye contact, invite people to approach you, because they still might not be sure where the practice is or who is running it. I've also had some success with this where people didn't necessarily know there was a practice, but because they were passing by, especially joggers, people who've stopped to take a water break or to adjust their podcast that they're listening to, doing this beckoning feature can invite people to come over, ask questions about the sport, and maybe even try out some of the drills. So be prepared. Before you even arrange for that practice, you should visit the field before you pick it. So I call this a vibe check, just getting an idea of what's there. Is this safe? Are there homeless people living in tents? Are there needles and condoms on the floor? Does this look like a place where I can actually have a practice? You also want to make sure that it's actually flat grass. It doesn't have to be regulation size field, but you definitely don't want concrete. You don't want a really bumpy ground where people are going to twist their ankle. And you also want to make sure that someone else isn't already using it. So if the rugby team regularly, weekly meets and practices at the same location and time where you were planning on meeting, you probably don't want to pick that spot, or you want to talk to people who are there to get an idea of what fields are normally available, or if there's a way to book them ahead of time. Dress appropriately. So you should probably participate in the drills, but it's possible that you don't. But even so, you should dress to be active. If you have long hair, try and tie it back, wear sun protection, wear running shoes. Just be ready to be active, but also you're setting an example to people of how to be prepared for a practice. They might not be the most prepared for that first practice, but people will pick up on those around them and be better prepared for the next practice. Have some way to check the time. So having a watch or a phone, you want to make sure that you start your practice on time, end it when you said you were going to end it, but also just throughout the practice to get an idea when you're taking a water break, how far into the practice you're going, how much time you have left. So there's a lot of equipment that can make your practice really effective. You don't necessarily have to have all of it. So I would say at minimum, you want to have a whistle and some balls. So the whistle is really good because especially during a scrimmage or a drill, a whistle is going to cut through chatter. It's going to quickly get attention and it's going to quickly signal for people to start and stop what they're doing. The balls, so dodgeballs and volleyballs, we use these rubber inflatable dodgeballs. These are game balls, but also you can use them in a number of drills. Cones, if you can manage to get cones are really, really helpful. They can mark lines, mark places for people to run to, mark boxes for people to do drills within. And if you're doing a scrimmage, it can mark the field and the halfway line. Brooms. So sometimes people will do a bring your own broom. So tell people to bring their own broom if you don't have them. We use PVC pipes for official games. You might be able to borrow some or buy some pretty cheaply at a hardware store, but there's a lot of different options for brooms. If you don't have brooms at first, that's okay. You could do just drills without brooms. I also recommend having a sign-up sheet, some sort of attendance with pens and some extra scrap paper. I would have people check in at the start of practice, write down their name and how you can contact them, often an email address or a cell phone number. And you want to keep track of who's actually showing up to your practice, who keeps coming up. And then later on, you might need to keep track of who's paid for membership fees or who's paid for the upcoming tournament fee or jerseys or whatever other expenses you guys have. Have an extra scrap paper in case you need to write out your email or some extra information for someone as it comes up. You might be surprised, but you actually do not have to have hoops to start a team or to run practices. A lot of new teams don't start with hoops. So in that case, you can just do other drills without hoops, and you can build them later, or you can borrow hoops until you need it, but you definitely do not need to have hoops to run a practice. Pennies are really useful for scrimmages. So this is an example of a penny, something like something to mark people on different teams for different drills. You can also use these for flag runner drills. So they have a lot of purposes, but they're definitely not required for your first practice. And make sure you bring water for yourself. So there's a lot of things here. You can even add to this. Some people have a first aid kit or a ball pump or different things, but I'd say the basics are having that ball and having that whistle just to get you started. So here's an example of that field. Maybe I would mark cones out here for a mini pitch for doing some drills. When you start out, depending on your group, they might not have the cardio and stamina of running a full regulation pitch, but it helps to have a halfway point. Similarly, you might want to do small boxes for doing drills. You can move these around throughout your practice, but it really helps guide your team on where they're playing and what to focus on. So think through your situations before you have this practice. So the first one is, how are you getting this equipment to the field? Especially if you have hoops, they're big, they're bulky, you probably can't carry them all on your own. So do you have someone to help you unload and set them up? Or maybe you just bring less equipment if you physically can't bring it all on your own. Is there a water fountain nearby? So water and washrooms, people are going to ask you this. It helps if you know that there are no water fountains or that they're turned off because of the time of year, that you just tell people on your event invite to bring water. Do you have to have a permit for the field? So a lot of city parks will want a permit to book a field, and otherwise you can just show up. But if you show up and someone else has a permit, you have to accept that that space is no longer available for your practice that week. Are people driving or walking to the field? If there's free parking, giving them a heads up ahead of time, because having to pay for parking is not great. And what will you do if someone gets hurt? So knowing the address, having a cell phone that you could call 911 if you needed to, is really good, especially I'm not expecting someone to get hurt, but if they do, you don't want to panic in that moment and not know what to do. Are there lights on the field when it gets dark? So some parks do have lights and they will light up when it gets dark. However, if it's dark, you don't want people walking home on their own. So maybe make plans that, the team meets at a transit station and you all walk to the field together and then you all leave together so that no one is left walking through a dark park on their own. The other thing is if there are or not lights, if it's going to get dark, you want to have your equipment all packed up before it gets dark. So especially if you're starting your practices in September, as the year goes on, the time when it gets dark is going to get earlier and earlier. So you might need to shift your practice end time, or you just might need to plan around that so that you're not trying to find all of your equipment on a dark field after it's gotten dark. And what if no one shows up? So unfortunately, every team has faced this, everyone. There will be weeks where maybe people don't show up. And more importantly, though, if you even have just one other person, you can modify a lot of drills to do things with someone. So if you have some drills ready, think about what if you don't get your full numbers and how can you adapt it so that even if there's only one or two other people, what could you do instead to still have the practice? So you, as the person running the practice, it's okay if you're not confident, but here's some examples that can kind of help you build that confidence. So the first thing is believing your preparation. So everything we just talked about, where you're checking out the field and you have your equipment, that is preparing you. That should build your confidence that you have something ready to actually run this practice. Ask for help. So it's okay if you don't know everything. If you have a friend or a roommate or someone who could come out, it helps to have those extra bodies for running drills, especially if you haven't built up a big group at first. You can also, if you know other people, maybe they have a sports background, maybe they could help you run some stretching drills or some drills help with your practice. These pictures on the right, so on the bottom, this is a Wonder Woman stance, and on the top, this is a power pose. So if you stand with your legs hip width apart and put your hands up in the air, this can kind of help build your confidence. Take some deep breaths. This can kind of ground you and let you focus so that you feel confident talking to strangers, or can calm down if you're in a situation you haven't been in before and you just need that extra confidence to get you through it. You could do this before the practice or before leaving your house, just something to give you some confidence that you can do this. So take a breath. As you can hear, when you're talking and you're nervous, it makes you talk a lot faster. So it's okay when you're explaining a drill or talking to people to pause, take a breath, and then pick up where you started. So it's okay to be nervous. Just make sure that you learn from this. And that's something that's going to happen throughout this, is you'll make mistakes and you'll wish that maybe you did things differently, but just learn from it, right? Everyone makes mistakes. Just learn and you'll continue to improve. Accept feedback. So some people might actually give you feedback and they're probably not trying to hurt you, but they might be trying to tell you something that isn't working for them or something that's frustrating them. So if someone says to you, hey, when you're explaining the drill, you kind of mumble, I can't really understand what's going on. They're not trying to be mean, but maybe that's a sign that you need to, enunciate more or try to project your voice or just practice speaking in front of people. This will probably help you be more effective in what you're doing. So when people give you feedback, think it through. You don't have to agree or commit to making a change, but I would say take it. Not everyone is going to give you useful feedback, and sometimes that's okay. It's okay to say that you don't know. So if you are doing a drill or playing a scrimmage and someone says, what happens if this happens with the ball? Or in a game, what if this happens? And if you don't know all the rules, that's okay. You can just say, I actually don't know. If you don't mind, after the practice, I will send you a link to the rule book and let's read it over. And maybe next week we can talk about what we read. Or, the next time we get a water break, I'll pull up the rule book on my phone and we can try and take a look. So it's okay to own up to people and say, I actually don't know the answer to that. Let's try and find out. And like I said, if no one shows up, it's okay. I'd say don't have practices on holiday weeks, or if you've been talking with your players and they are talking about something coming up like exams and you think a lot of them are not going to show up, just cancel practice. Just don't put yourself through that. The other thing though is people might not think anything of just not showing up to practice. They might be enjoying practice, but that week they're just not feeling well, they're sick, they have their cousin's birthday, and it would be nice if they gave you a heads up and said, hey, I'm not going to show up. But it's okay if sometimes people don't show up. Just learn from it and try and communicate your plans so that hopefully in future weeks you don't run into those kinds of issues. Reach out for help. So Quadball Canada, other teams, you have lots of people in the Quadball community who want to help you. You can have a joint practice. So this is where if there's more than one team, maybe once a month or every now and then, you have one combined practice. That way you have more people, you can share equipment, you can learn from each other. Another option is to have a guest coach come out. So this is where maybe someone from another team comes out to your practice and they're going to help run drills or they're going to support you. And this can either be just a good example for you to learn from, or they might be giving you a break. Maybe you've been talking a lot and you're out of ideas and this person's going to help you there. I'll also say that the joint practice and the guest coach is not just a sign of a new team or someone struggling. Experienced teams also do this. So don't feel bad about getting help or asking for support where you need it. So typical practice structure. So the first thing I would do when people are gathering, try and start on time, but give a notice that you're starting. So I'd blow the whistle, tweet, tweet, and just announce practice is starting in 2 minutes. Take a lap around the field at your own pace. So this is a good thing that people can kind of see, okay, practice is starting. I have time to put on my running shoes or get involved. The whistle will cut through people's conversations and you can get started. I would start the first several games with a passing drill. So this is where you put everyone in a circle and you give them a volleyball, one volleyball for the circle, and they toss the volleyball around and say your name as you pass the volleyball. So I'd say, my name is Alex, and then I pass the volleyball, right? And then the next person says, my name is Sarah, and they pass the volleyball to someone else. If someone mumbles or says their name too quietly or too quickly, don't be afraid to say, could you repeat that? What was that? Did you say your name was Sarah? And just make sure that you understand what they're saying. Try and say people's names correctly. So if they have a certain pronunciation, just clarify and do this a couple times, pass it around until everyone's introduced themselves a couple times. Then I would say do the opposite. So instead of announcing your name when you pass the ball, instead you are saying the name of the person you're passing to. So this is where I would say Sarah, and then I throw the ball to Sarah. If I've forgotten, I'm going to point and say, could you repeat your name? And then that person or the group can yell out the person's name. This is really good. Knowing your teammates' names on the field is really good. Knowing the names of the people who are at your practice can help build that bond. And also you're practicing just catching and passing drills. Active stretching. So you can Google active stretching. This is a good opportunity to have someone else lead so that you're not leading the entire practice. So if you have that friend or you have someone who's been coming out and showing interest, you can ask them probably ahead of time, but even on the spot, if they will lead the active stretching and just get people ready for the practice. Drills. So you can go through a couple of drills. I'm going to include a link below to a drill library where you can pull things from. Each of these drills will probably be about 20 minutes long. And ideally, you are focusing on areas where your team needs improvement. So you're working on agility, you're working on cardio, you're working on field awareness, catching, lots of different areas that you can focus on. At the beginning, you're just going to use the drills to try and learn the game. You're going to break down the game into the basics, right? Passing, throwing, defense, things like that. And these drills will help your team build those skills. End with a scrimmage. So this is a mini game. In the beginning, I would say just do first to 50 and just have chasers and beaters. Those are the two positions. And when the game is done, have people grab water, but have them gather around and say what worked, what didn't work. So we don't want to focus on calling out individuals, saying you messed up, you didn't do very good at this. Instead, we're saying generalizations, right? So we're saying it seemed like we were more able to score goals when we went up with someone, when we communicated to our team and we were all heading up together. Or we got scored on a lot when we didn't have beaters back here to defend our hoops. You know, different things that seem to work, make people realize different things that are working, that are not working, and then start another scrimmage. So when you're done, I would make sure you thank everyone for coming out, emphasize when the next practice is and mention anything upcoming, right? So a teaser for what to look forward to for the next week's practice. We're going to work on these drills, mention upcoming tournaments, just kind of an overview of what to expect. You do want people to keep coming out. And throughout the whole practice, I would say between each drill, take water breaks. So tell people, let's take a 2-minute water break. Let's take 5 minutes for water. Encourage people to drink, but also allow people to grab water as needed. So if someone steps out in the middle of a drill and they just want to sit down or they need water, let them. Don't stop them if they know their body better than you do. So post-practice socials, these are optional. You do not have to do this, but some teams enjoy this and they find that they have some good bonding. You get to know your teammates off of the field, have conversations. So saying something like at the end of that practice, when you're done, you're thanking people for coming out, saying, if any of you want to join us, some of us are going to get ice cream down the road. You don't have to come, but if anyone wants to, we're heading out in 5 minutes, right? So anyone who wants to can come out. You can also have this open to these people's friends, their wider social circle, and those people, you're just getting to know your teammates better, but also maybe those people will take interest in Quadball and be interested in coming out. I recommend having some sort of social media or online team space, so a group, a workspace, a chat thread, something where people can ask questions or share memes or talk about an upcoming tournament. This is a really good way to get to know your team better, to find out what your team is thinking about or areas that they're struggling with. And I would recommend sending out a message about the next practice, probably a day or two before, just reminding people, hey, it's this Sunday, 3 p.m., reminder that there's practice. We're going to be going over this drill, or don't forget to bring blank. Just something to remind them to keep coming out. And also it gives people an opportunity to say, I'm not going to be able to be there this week, or, have you considered that there's construction on that road? Are we still going to be able to access that field? Any of that sort of chat. There's also a difference as a coach or captain between group messages and direct messages. So a group message is like what I just said, reminder, there's practice this week, or the tournament's coming up in 2 weeks. We're going to plan for this. Versus direct messages, you have a better chance of getting, I think, honest feedback or people to be vulnerable with you. So if someone skipped a practice, I think it's okay to message them and say, hey, we missed your practice last week. Hope everything is okay. Or, sorry you weren't able to come to practice this week. Do you think you're planning on coming next week? Some people will appreciate that you notice their absence. They might not have actually thought that anyone would notice they didn't show up, and that can encourage them to come back, or they can share with you things that they're struggling. So someone might say, I'm really having trouble keeping up with the drills. I don't think I'm in good enough shape to play Quadball. And that's where you can encourage them or work with, we can have different drills to help you. You want to help people, especially if they're sabotaging themselves or have anxiety. You want to support them to keep coming out and being a part of your team. You can also praise people. So this is just a check-in on people, but saying, that you do see improvement, that you think that certain people are doing good, and maybe give them rules for future weeks. So some teams, you might have a publicly posted schedule of each week someone else is running certain drills or running active stretching or is picking the post practice social. That just gets people more involved in the team and can also take some pressure off of you as the coach or captain, who then doesn't have to be responsible for organizing everything yourself. So people I find generally join Quadball for a couple reasons. There's 3, but people often focus on one of these. So one is people are looking for friends or a social event. They're looking for a feeling of belonging. So you'll find this especially when people have moved to a new area. They're looking to get to know people. And for these people, having you remember their name or having that post-game social where they can just chat with people is going to be really important to them. And that's what's going to keep them coming back and being a part of your team. The second option is fitness, health. They're looking for a way to distress. They're looking for a regular schedule, something that they can just run around and get active. So these people, it might not really make any difference to them if they're playing soccer or rugby or Quadball, but they're looking for that that regular schedule that would let them work out. The third option is competition, winning, seeing personal improvement. So these are people who they want the team to do well. They want to win. They want to go to nationals. And this can also be a challenge. I will say that these people are really good for keeping your team going. But you might want to think about, if you're going to tournaments and you're not winning, how do you satisfy these people, right? What small wins can you take, right? So maybe last tournament you only beat one team. This tournament you beat two teams. So even though you didn't win the whole tournament, you got to celebrate those wins so that they feel like they're still accomplishing something. So too much emphasis on only one will drive people away. So if your team is just focused on winning and competition, some of those social people might disappear. And I think you do need a healthy balance of these three to have a full roster and have people really enjoying it and keeping coming out. But it's okay to lean towards one of these if you find that your team is more interested in one of these, especially season by season, it might change. But these are kind of the motivators that keep people coming out to your team. So you can do this. I'd say a lot of people have been in your position looking to start a team or take over a team, and it might feel daunting, but you can definitely do this. I hope this video is really helpful for you. We've got some resources here, but I do want to emphasize you are not alone. There is a community of quadball people in Canada and around the world who want to see you succeed. Reach out if you need help, and we'll see what we can do. So a lot of players, when it really cements that they want to play quad ball, that they want to keep doing this, is when they come out to a tournament. So even if your team hasn't been playing for very long, having them come to a tournament and compete, even if they're new, I'd say go for it. That's where a lot of people get really excited and really want to keep seeing themselves and their team grow. So I would encourage you, have that regular, consistent practice and try and get your team to a tournament as soon as possible. And that's where your team is going to really flourish and grow from there. So good luck, and reach out if you need help.